Welcome all to Boston 9/11 Truth. And our special guest today is Richard Krushnic. And he's going to address his activities with trying to get 9/11 Truth out to the public, and in particular, the issues behind the attempts to coincide with the peace movement. Have I got that right, Richard?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you take the floor. We know we have you for a limited time period tonight, and I'm very glad you agreed to be our speaker tonight.
I think it was 2008 maybe or 9 when we had 400 people listening to David Ray Griffin at the BU School of Theology. And then I think it was 2010, but I could be wrong, when we participated in this New England Regional Anti-War Conference. It's interesting now. I recall one of my colleagues in the anti-war movement back then, John Harris. He came to our thing at the BU School of Theology, and he was amazed by the crowd. And he was saying, "Wow, you 9/11 Truth people can get more people out than we can in the anti-war movement." Well, that didn't last long. But it's interesting that there was, I guess, there certainly was a higher degree of interest then, because it was closer to 2001. So that's one explanation for why we were able to draw a good crowd then. And then, so anyway, this United National Anti-War Coalition, UNAC, which is still active today, it's one of two national peace organizations, and it's small. It's no bigger than the other one. And it was back then controlled completely by Trotskyist socialist organizations. The Socialist Revolution, the Answer Coalition, the Party for Socialism and Liberation. There were two other organizations. I can't remember what they were. So anyway, and they, like Mass Peace Action was not part of that coalition. Mass Peace Action existed, but it is not an expressly socialist organization. It is not run by expressly socialist organizations. And so there's an ideological degree of separation between UNAC, the UNAC National Coalition, a Mass Peace Action. Mass Peace Action is one of about a dozen affiliates, state affiliates of Peace Action, which is a national lobbying organization in Washington, D.C. And Mass Peace Action is constantly at loggerheads with the national office, because the national office is more cautious. It's not as left. It's whatever. So I'm just giving you a little bit of the national and local framework within which this is all, this is happening. So
yes,
so anyway, so back then, I think Al was on it with me, and Lenny was on it and managed not to sabotage it by some miracle. We were participated in these planning meetings, to plan this New England Regional Anti-War Conference. It was going to be a weekend conference at MIT. And so it was rough going. There were people who didn't want us to participate in the planning or in the program, but others among them wanted us in, and so we worked on it. And I set up the environmental workshop and got people to present on the connection between the peace movement and the environmental movement. I think I set up another workshop, which was about what was going on in Latin America. And then in the plenaries, they gave 9/11 Truth 20 minutes, I think it was, 20 minutes. And Peter Dale Scott was going to be our speaker. And he was in California, and we had technical difficulties. And so then it turned out that we couldn't get him working, and so somebody had to read his speech. And I remember Sander Hicks jumped at the chance, and he was going to read the speech. But then the other organizers jumped up, said, "Oh, no, 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 no. The only one," because they're so distrustful of the 9/11 Truth movement at that time, as they still are. But so they insisted if the speech was going to be read, it had to be read by me, because I was the only representative from 9/11 Truth who had a history of working with the peace organizations, and even with the Trotskyist organizations that organized the conference, because I had participated with them on some national demonstrations in Washington on other matters. At any rate, so I read some of the speech, and then we finally got Peter Dale Scott working, and he finished his speech and blah, blah, blah. And we distributed some 9/11 literature and books there. But before and after, before there were these series of conversations, and then after we had one event at E5 in downtown Boston. We had 50 people there, including a couple of representatives from UNAC. And so we had this big discussion about political alignments, and what had been true all along and talked about was sort of discussed more thoroughly that night. And it's that oh my God, now I'm forgetting his name. Oh, it's terrible. He has his own sort of right-wing organization, political organization. He's frequently running for president or political office.
Oh, yeah, the guy from India.
No,
Indian name.
no.
Oh, okay.
And they have a newspaper, and anyway, he caused some trouble.
Steve Conley?
What?
Steve Conley?
No.
Okay.
He caused some trouble for the anti-war movement in Maine by appearing with some of his colleagues and disrupting something or other. And then they were aware, these other peace organizations, that libertarians were prominent in the 9/11 Truth movement. And the combination of libertarians and this other guy, oh my God, I can't believe I can't remember his name. That was
not Dr. Shiva. Not Dr. Shiva. Okay.
No.
Okay.
No. LaRouche, Lyndon LaRouche.
Oh, sure.
So the fact that libertarians and Lyndon LaRouche were 9/11 truthers was enough for the Trotskyists, and they didn't want to have anything to do with 9/11 truth because it was contaminated by right-wing organizations. So if they stood behind something, it had to be bullshit, or even if it wasn't bullshit, it had to be, you don't want to do anything with them because you don't want to work with those people. So that was the attitude of the sectarian left that organized that anti-war conference, even though they did allow us to participate. And then we had the audacity to appear, it's either the next year or 2 years later, at their subsequent national peace or anti-war rally or weekend conference in Pittsburgh. And so we got about 20 people to go there from mainly Boston and New York. And we proposed some 9/11, I don't even remember what it was, I'm sorry to say. We proposed some 9/11 truth resolution to be voted on by everybody. And there were about 400 or 500 people there. And we, and then people, of course, everybody was, oh my God, these 9/11 truth people, look, what the fuck? They are moving in. They're actually here in numbers. They are proposing things. This was perceived as this big threat, like we were moving in. We were going to take over. So there was a lot of, all the leaders were talking to each other, and then they would come talk to me. They'd go talk to each other, but anyway, we got our resolution on the floor, and surprisingly, it got over 40% of the vote, which was not supposed to get in a Trotskyist, national peace conference. And then actually, we didn't have it together. But if you wanted to continue this thankless struggle, we could have been on the national UNAC organizing or whatever board or steering committee for the following year until the next conference, but we didn't do that. So I think that is that chapter of I think it was 2008, 2010. I believe that's a story of pretty much abject failure to make any gains, really. So then I personally gave up on, making inroads in the anti-war movement. And then I became active in other political work, not so much anti-war work, for a number of years. Then I started getting active in MAPA again, Mass Peace Action. Mass Peace Action is, I would say it's the best of the, I think, about a dozen state chapters of Peace Action. And it's a very robust organization. It astonishingly, with I think a budget of about 120,000 or something like that. It has 2 full-time staff people. All year round, it has at least 4 interns from area colleges who are getting credit for working with Mass Peace Action.
Is it a 501c3?
I can't remember if it's a C3 or a C4. I'm sorry to say.
Sounds explosive.
It's a C4 because it supports political candidates directly. It has big organization for political campaigns, phone banks, and all kinds of stuff. And what am I trying to say? It has a newsletter, a print newsletter of 3,000. It has a digital newsletter of 19,000. And it has a pretty big lobbying operation. It right now has 8 bills before the state legislature and cooperates with other groups nationally. It has 4 or 5 bills in Congress. It has bills here on divesting from nuclear, state divestment from nuclear weapons, state reporting every year to the citizens of Massachusetts in detail how they spent every penny of the money they got from the federal government during the year. I forget what all the bills are. The federal bills are things like no first use of nuclear weapons. President can't launch nuclear weapons. It takes 4 officials to agree to not launch nuclear weapons. Divestment, to stop building the new generation of nuclear weapons, all kind of stuff like that. So anyway, it's a big organization that does, with the resources, the financial resources that it has, it's an extraordinary organization. It does an amazing amount of work with the resources that it has. So, and I'm active. Everybody in the leadership knows me. They appreciate my contributions to the organization. I'm very active with the Nuclear Disarmament Group and the Latin American and Caribbean Working Group and the Raytheon campaign. They periodically, I speak in webinars there. I publish articles about nuclear weapons stuff. So I'm definitely an in person at Mass Peace Action. So the only thing I've used that for is in email chains among that are the email chains that involve 15, 20 people discussing upcoming events or the direction of the organization or various things. When there's an opportunity, I talk about the JFK, RFK, MLK assassinations, Malcolm X assassination, Fred Hampton assassination, the coup d'etat of 1963, the false, getting the Japanese to attack Pearl Harbor to get the U.S. into the war, 9/11, everything, and the connections, lines between that. I write about all that in email chains where it's appropriate to the conversation. The main point I usually try to make is that the failure of the anti-war movement to come to grips with these absolutely true conspiracies that have totally changed politics in the United States, the failure of the anti-war movement to come to grips with this and to allow it into its discourse means that if the U.S. really does intend to go to war with Iran this time, all they have to do is sink one of our own ships and they're all set. Everybody will be around. Oh, let's go get them. In other words, by avoiding coming to grips with this, the anti-war movement simply leaves the false flag tool in the imperialist tool bag that they can use anytime they want. And we all know that if they do, they will be absolutely successful, just like they have been every time in the past, because they fail to face the reality of these false flag operations. So what do I get when I do this in these email chains? Mostly I get silence. My contribution, I may have said other things that I get responses to about whatever the issue is. But what I have to say about the assassinations and 9/11, usually I don't get response to that part of what I say, except occasionally I get plaudits, I get agreement, I get, some people write in about how that's correct, and that's what I'm saying is true. One of those, of course, who does that occasionally is Marty Schatz. So to finish up, I just wanted to talk about what Marty Schatz and his little group were trying to do and why they stopped trying to do it through mass peace action, and went to do it through the Community Church of Boston, where they had a warm reception. And what Marty has recommended to us about another way we might expand listenership, and that is that I think the way Marty and I see it is that the coup d'etat of 1963, that's the key event, not 9/11 truth. 1963 is the key event, because that empowered, it started with the successful effort to get Japan to attack Pearl Harbor. That worked like a charm. And even though it was totally proven backwards and forwards, the public has no interest whatsoever in believing that the US, deliberately sacrificed 2,500 people in Pearl Harbor. But that's what happened, and the success of that event it emboldened people to execute the coup of 1963 and do 9/11, because they already had the experience of pulling off global shifting sudden events. So anyway, Marty and I don't know if Ed Curtin was involved in that. I forget who else was working with him on that. They wanted to take advantage of Kennedy's American University speech, the famous speech to end the Cold War, and use sections of that speech to be the theme of different webinars. So they've done a series of, I think, 4 webinars so far, or something like that. And after the second one, they decided to stop doing it through peace action. And I still don't know the full details of that, but it was obvious. It was for the same issue that we have. It's that peace action is a organization of leftists and liberals, and so you can't really do anything that pisses off either the leftists or the liberals, in order to keep the current effectiveness of the organization together. And the stuff about JFK and some information in them about the assassinations started irritating some people who have bought the conspiracy theory, people are bad Kool-Aid within. So it was clear that friction was growing over this series. And so they just, rather than keep arguing over it or trying to work through it, they just left. And the community church was happy to start supporting their webinars or this series. And the other night, I think, when Marty was speaking on this to this group, he was saying that, well, I don't know if he said it this way exactly, but so I'll say it, but we agree on it, and that is that without understanding what happened in 1963, you're asking an awful lot for people to buy into what happened on 9/11. it's so far out of their, their worldview, the way they see the world, it's very difficult. But there's a lot more understanding and agreement about economic and military forces that wanted to get rid of Kennedy, that's an easier sell. And since one flows from the other, 9/11 would never have happened without the coup of 1963. He thinks it behooves us to resurrect public education about the assassinations of the 60s and drawing connections between them and 9/11. And I happen to agree with that. I think, we're getting I think we all have by now a fairly sophisticated understanding of psychological defense mechanisms and psychic numbing and what's the famous psychological phrase that I can't remember? The incompatibility of your
Cognitive dissonance.
cognitive dissonance, right. We all get it. And we all understand that it's very important and that it's probably our biggest problem right now. And this is one thought worthy of discussion about how we might make a little headway by going back to the assassinations and then coming back forward to 9/11. Now, in the group of us that are planning a showing of the Ted Walters movie about the life of Graham McQueen, who died a year ago, the Canadian peace activist and 9/11 truther. We just, in our last meeting, we talked about this and we tentatively decided that we were going to try to have a JFK assassination forum at the Community Church of Boston, to be followed a week or two later by the showing of the Graham McQueen film and a panel reflecting on it subsequently in a different Boston location, and hoping that we generate some interest in the first program that will translate to the second program.
The second program was going to be Coolidge Theater, wasn't it?
The second program?
Yeah.
That's what we're thinking of. Yeah. The movie showing. Yeah. Anyway, we do have Marty Schatz and Ed Curtin, and there's one other guy, and Jack Bottomley. You know who else is around in Massachusetts who has published on the JFK assassination. I'm working on an article on the JFK assassination, but that would be my first. That's about U.S. multinational corporate interests in Indonesia who wanted Kennedy dead. What I consider to be an unappreciated corner of the JFK assassination forces. But anyway, local people could participate in such a panel. We could even get some remote participation if we wanted, since it would be a hybrid program. So anyway, so we were thinking about doing that and then following it a week or two later by the Graham McQueen program, and see if that. Now, we are fortunate in that regard that Amar, I can't remember his last name, he was one of the university students who was a MAPA intern 2 years ago. And during that time, he got very interested in the JFK assassination. And I have met with him.
Ahmad?
Yes, Amar Ahmad, yes. So he works part-time. So he went from MAPA to the Community Church of Boston, and he works there part-time. and he is principal in the arranging of all of the webinars. And he's a 9/11 truther, and he, he's becoming a student of the assassinations and all that. So we have him as an ally there. That's why probably they agreed if we wanted, we could show the Graham McQueen film there on the 25th, on the anniversary of his death on the 25th of what is it, April. But we're going to show it probably at the Coolidge Corner Theater instead. But they've already had a program, more than one, on the JFK assassination, and they would be, I'm sure, happy to host such a panel. I haven't asked them yet, but I'm sure they would be glad to. And then we could figure out what we wanted to do with that program, and then, of course, someone at that program would have to give a little talk about how that led, how 1963 led to 9/11, and how we're following up with this connection with our program the following week on Graham McQueen. So I don't have any more, and like I asked the co-chair and the head staff person of MAPPA about hosting the webinar, the Graham McQueen webinar. And they both said they didn't want to do it because it would be so divisive in the organization. So that's that. So I don't see how we're really in a much better position now than we were in 2008 and 2010. The only thing is public, it seems like back then there was a significantly smaller percentage of the population whose predisposition is to disbelieve anything the government says. The portion of that population has grown considerably. So maybe we will find in the coming couple of years a more receptive audience. I don't know.
Well, it could
Oh,
also.
wait, one other thing. One thing that hurts us deeply in terms of making any headway with the anti-war movement is Richard Gage running off on every other thing. He's not Mr. Science 9/11 Truth anymore. He's off on all kinds of different things now, none of which have the kind of hard evidence behind them that AE 9/11 Truth did.
Is that what you hear, or that's what you surmise?
That's what I surmise.
Okay, you haven't actually heard that.
Well, I've heard that from 3 or 4 9/11 Truth colleagues.
Yeah, but from the from the peace movement, have you heard that?
No.
So
There's so few people in the peace movement who pay any attention to 9/11.
Okay,
I
so why
wouldn't
do
hear
you
that.
think that hurts us with the peace movement?
Well, now I'm okay. Well, for one thing, like sidling up to what's his name, who he just had an interview with what's his name at that right-wing convention, Al.
Oh,
Wake up,
yeah,
Al.
put me on the spot.
Who is he interviewing?
Well, he interviewed at the Freedom Convention. I think he had it wasn't Trump's son, but who else was
It
there?
was the guy,
Damn it.
It
Got it?
doesn't matter because this
I
is
believe it was
that
it
you
Roger
two-
Stone?
yes,
Roger
Roger
Stone?
Stone,
That-
right,
that's right,
right,
that's right.
you know,
But that's
you
something
know,
that you two object to. Is it something that the people on the peace movement object to?
yes, the people in
Yes.
the peace, but people in the peace movement are not fans of Roger Stone.
Roger
And they
Stone,
don't appreciate sidling up to Roger Stone and helping
Roger
Roger Stone
Stone
have
is
a
a
Do
flag.
they
felon.
even know that Richard Gage did that?
No, no.
Okay, so
Right,
I
yeah.
think you got nothing there.
Well, I disagree, Sue. Roger Stone is a felon and he's,
That's
he-
your
he-
opinion. That's
it's
your
not an
opinion that
opinion,
it's
it's a
hurting
fact.
the truth move in the
It's a
peace movement.
fact, and you have to use discretion in who you're promoting. It's not an opinion, believe me. And if you
It's your
talk to
opinion.
anybody, if you talk
It's
to
your
anybody on the
opinion,
left, they're
And
not, you mention Roger Stone, they'll roll their eyes and go, "Get out of here."
well,
Um,
yes, but that.
What I'm trying to say is the
But we
extent to
don't
which,
know that that's what hurt us. It sounds like what really hurt us was the LaRouche connection and the peace movement being Marxist. Because, the combination was just too much for them. Because we had libertarians and LaRouche supporting 9/11 truth. So they immediately, as Marxists, saw us as being anti-Marxists, which
yes,
we had that association. Now,
Right.
my question for you, Richard, is has the peace movement moved away from Marxism at all?
the peace movement never was Marxist. UNAC was Marxist. And that was always represented a minority in the peace movement.
Can I interject something or?
Yes, now you're gonna, I'm afraid I have 2 more minutes, then I must
I'll
go.
let you,
Before you
Go
go,
ahead, no,
Richard,
go ahead,
Please,
I'm done.
please, Rebecca,
go
we
ahead.
don't get to hear from you all.
I mean, I attended a Quaker meeting when I first got interested in 9/11 truth and, first was attending these meetings and the TAP meeting in New York City. And this has always been an issue that's really important to me, to figure out how to bring people from the left and the anti-war movement into the 9/11 educated area. And they're extremely ideologically biased. Like they have a very extreme, like maybe ideology is not the right word, but they're very much like, they have a very serious aversion to like what they view as the other side, like in terms of like the right on the right, which is something I can't really always agree with about the people on the left, although I do agree with the anti-war movement and a lot of it. But it's like you have to approach these people in a way where you can get them to come, to actually just take it seriously, just to open their minds just to that part of like perhaps what Richard said about the Kennedy assassination and the history of false flags, because otherwise they're just continually, maybe unwittingly, like becoming the gatekeepers for the false flags, and I don't know if they understand this or if they're just, I know one thing, and that is that the left are like hypersensitive, super biased about this, like the divide between the right and the left, often. And I'm trying to figure out ways we could actually bridge that gap somehow. So that's all I wanted to say.
Richard, before you go, can I ask you one question?
He's gone.
Does
Sorry, I didn't
9/11,
want to take up his time.
did he
Richard
leave?
left the call.
Oh, for Christ's sake. Oh, Jesus. Well, I wanted to ask him if, does the 9/11 truth movement, as a peace movement, hold any water with the establishment left in his experience? And that's an important part of it. We tried to reach out to the left as a peace movement, that once you understand 9/11, then the whole emphasis on peace rather than war becomes obvious. And so I'm unfortunately he's gone. I don't, I really would have liked to have him address that.
I'm very sorry. I had no idea. I would have just not been talking if I knew it was gonna drop
No,
off.
no, it's okay. It's all right. But
Al, why don't you send him that, send that question to him and copy us all in?
yeah, I will do that.
Yeah.
I
Um,
see him because I attend Mass Peach Action Zoom meetings and meetings sometimes, and also Veterans for Peace. So I sometimes cross paths with Richard when he's on the meeting and electronically at least.
I think you make an important point, Rebecca, and it's certainly been a frustration for me personally, you know, and my involvement with the left. I've been with Richard for many years, and you know, basically, we were almost asked to leave E5 in one of those meetings because they wouldn't have anything to do with us because they thought of us as a right-wing organization. And I want to get away from that. I want to be able to make the case that we are a peace movement like them. We participated in the Boston demonstration that MAPPA had last year. It was a peace march, and we have a number of signs that state clearly that 9/11 truths for peace. And so that's a big concern of mine to try to get that message to them in particular.
Yeah.
I just had a quick question, guys. I'm sorry, Susan and Al, I missed the meeting on Tuesday, but are we meeting again next week? I was out of town.
Yes,
Okay, you'll send it next week, Sue?
we're planning for
Yeah.
Peace for 9/11, yes, at
Yeah.
3:30 on Tuesday.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for hosting this tonight. I need to run myself.
All right, I should stop
Good to see you.
recording since he's left us.